You've entered BOOKSTORM with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Welcome back to BOOKSTORM Podcast, all of you fiction book lovers. As you know, Kristen and I search the globe for best-selling fiction. We read it, we vet it. We have happened upon the most wonderful novel, The Berry Pickers, and we're thrilled to have Amanda Peters with us here today. Amanda, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's exciting.
Before we get started, I want to tell our listeners a little bit about you. Now, as you know, we have listeners in 82 countries. I haven't looked at the stats lately, all 50 US states and something like 1,800 cities. It's thanks to authors like you. Let me tell them a little bit about you to pique their interest. Now, what's amazing is this is Amanda Peters' debut novel. It is wonderful. She is an author of Mi'kmaq writing and settler ancestry, which is just so fascinating. It's a new topic that I feel is trending right now. This book won the Andrew Carnegie Medal of Excellence, the 2023 Barnes & Noble Discovery Prize, Amazon Best Book of the Year, Apple Best Debut, New Yorker Best Book, Good Housekeeping, Harper's Bazaar, Booklist, and Kirkus starred reviews. And there's way more, but I've got to quit because we've got to hear you talk about it. Congratulations. I
Thank
love
you.
what you said here. I am a woman, a daughter, a sister, an auntie, a cat mom, a dog mom, a friend of descendant of Revolutionary War sailor, of accused witches, and Mi'kmaq ancestry. I love that. It's a compilation of who you are today, thanks to all of your ancestors. She's also an associate professor in the Department of English and Theater at Acadia University in Nova Scotia. And I'm just going to sum it up with what People magazine said. A stunning debut about love, race, brutality, and the balm of forgiveness. Loved it. Thanks so
That's
much
my
for joining.
that's my favorite one, The Balm of Forgiveness. I always
Ah,
remember that one. It just sums it up so well. Yeah.
and a lesson to all of us.
Mm.
Well, Amanda, we like to give our listeners a little bit of the background of what's going on in the story. So, if you'll allow me, I'll kind of summarize it. And if you want to add anything at the end, we would love it if you did. And I'm going to show this cover one more time of this beautiful book because, we always talk about judging a book by its cover. And
Mm.
this one was so beautiful. It caught our eye a while back. And I'm so glad that you're on the show joining us. We are just thrilled. All
Well,
right.
thank you.
So let's talk about your story. In The Berry Pickers, we are first transported in 1962 to this beautiful family. They're a Mi'kmaq family from Nova Scotia, and they arrive in Maine seasonally to pick blueberries. Now, over the course of one of their stints when they were picking berries, something happens to their 4-year-old daughter, Ruthie. She is sitting on a rock. She was playing, occupying herself, and her brother Joe is with her. And then she disappears. Now, the family is distraught, and Joe, in fact, is very profoundly affected. He spends the rest of his life trying to figure out what happened to his sister. Now, there's another part to the story. We are in Maine some years later, and we meet Norma. And she is growing up as the only child in an affluent family, but there's a lot of family secrets and things that don't add up over the course of her life. She has always felt a little displaced. She has visions that people just keep telling her are bad dreams. And, as she grows older, she starts to realize these things really don't add up. And we start to see how she is piecing together the core of who she is. So
Mhm.
I don't want to say too much more, but this beautiful story just shows how these families deal with trauma, but
Yeah.
also healing and forgiveness. Did you want to add anything to that background?
No, that was probably better than I could do. But yeah, I love it when people say that there's also joy, forgiveness in this story because it's not all about trauma. So yeah, you did a really great job. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome.
It is just so beautiful. I have to say, it is one of the most beautiful, heartfelt novels I've ever read. It speaks to marginalized voices and underrepresented people with a story that we don't know about, and it's an important story. But you showed us the long lasting effects of parents and family members' mistakes and imperfections passed down to the next generation. Whether we acknowledge them or not, conscious or subconscious, they're woven into our story. Your characters called them sometimes ghosts.
Mhm.
I had to ask you, we all have imperfect family histories. How did your characters, and I love to always say, all of us in the real world, deal with these mistakes that were made before our time? Do we coexist? Do we abandon them? Do we accept or deny? Or maybe it's different for each of us.
Yeah, there is no perfect family, right? Every family is imperfect, and I do think it's different for everybody. I did have one mentor actually say to me that it was very brave to write a book of all flawed characters, of all dislikable characters. And I said, they're not dislikable. They are flawed. They are human, right? We can all, at one point, um, it's not, I don't know if you can sympathize with Joe for what he did, but maybe you can. You can empathize at least. You can, like, the human context is there for all the characters. So they are flawed, they are imperfect families, but I think they're also a little bit real as opposed to everything being tied up neatly in a bow and everything is perfect. Mistakes before us. When I was looking through your guys' questions, like, these guys are really smart. What am I gonna say?
we are we're engaged with this book.
Okay.
So
I
we're
think the characters do take on a lot of the guilt, especially Joe, right? He does take on the guilt of being the last person to see his sister. And he carries that and he carries it with him for his entire life. And it leads him to do some very irrational things, violent things, and just went running away. And with Norma, of course, she is the product of her mother who has suffered and who has these ghosts that I'm trying to say this without giving too much away, and I'm trying to
right.
like, how am I going to say this without telling everybody the story? But her mother and her mother's ghosts and her mother's trauma, her mother, her adopted mother. So her traumas and how she layers them onto poor Norma. So yeah, it is a story of flawed families. It is a story of guilt. But I think in the end, the people who deserve redemption achieve redemption, and they do find peace, I guess.
We can all relate to it because we have people in our family and even ourselves. There was a stranger, an indigenous woman in your story that said to Joe, we all do bad things, but that doesn't make us bad people.
Mhm.
And I sort of liked that because don't we all deserve a second chance, maybe?
Yeah, and I think they do. Joe does get a little bit more than second chances. He gets quite a few chances, but in the end, he does come around. But that's a tenet of indigenous. I don't know about on all indigenous cultures, but a lot of indigenous cultures is you separate the action from the person. People can do bad things; it doesn't make them a bad person, right? And there's always opportunities to heal and rectify those situations. So, he is a good person. He just did a bad thing.
Yeah.
So, but he still carries the guilt. He still carries it. It's still so heavy with him. But some people do feel that way. Some people carry that guilt. Some people can just dismiss it, others can't.
Yeah. I love too that he had to really wrestle with that, whether that was indicative of his whole people group or
Mhm.
if that was something internal. So we won't tell people what happened, as far as what he came out on the side of, but I thought that was a really interesting aspect of the story. And I wasn't going to bring it up till you did because I don't want to give anything away.
I know it's so hard to look at my head trying to figure out. I don't want to give anything away.
I wanted to ask you in the story, and I want to make sure I'm pronouncing this right. Is it Kiju?
Kiju.
Kiju.
Yeah.
She told the grandmother, she
Yeah.
told Leah, and this is a quote, lost souls have to find their own way home. Now, as a parent, we want to provide guidance to our children and give them advice, and we care about their well-being. We can see the effects of some of the choices that they're making down the road. But is Kiji right? Is that something that we've got to let them work out and be there when they ask? Isn't that a hard place to navigate?
Yeah, as speaking as not a parent, as only a dog parent and a cat parent and auntie, which is my superpower, I'm not sure. I think there comes a point when you have to, um, like a 14-year-old isn't going to find their way home. Maybe we need to help them, but a 30-year-old, it's up to them to find their way home if they're a lost soul. So I think that's kind of what I was getting there, that it's up to Joe to return to his family. Um, with Ruthie, it's a little bit different because she's not even aware of a lot of things around her family. But yeah, that's an interesting question.
And it's hard too, because as an aunt, as a parent, we see where they're making these choices and sometimes they don't find their way home. And
No.
that's I think that's why we want to get involved, because we know things don't always turn out okay.
And there was opportunities there, like May, Joe's sister, does reach out and try to persuade him to find his way home, and he just wasn't ready. I think when he was ready, he was ready. He needed something to happen to push him back. And again, I'm trying not to say what happened to push him back, but yeah, yeah, I do think it's true. I know from my family, people have gone and some of them most of them have come home. So yeah, and again, every family's different, every mother is different, every child is different, but there has to be a time where I guess you just let them go and just hope for the best. And that's kind of a sad thing too, is a mother's hope, right? She thinks that Ruthie is still alive after all those years and that she will eventually come home. So there's a quote, one of my favorite quotes in the book is, "Hope is a great thing until it isn't." Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, and she just maintains that hope that she will come home, that she will find her way home.
I love that. I love that quote in the story. I want to dive down into this guilt a little bit more because I
Mm.
feel like we can all relate to it. And it's not just Joe, it's a few other characters too. And I just wondered, for sometimes guilt prevents those characters and us from living a full life. I realize fear and guilt are very much the same. And I wonder, were your characters afraid that the universe, fate, God was waiting to pay them back? Do we all feel that way sometime? That no good thing could ever come our way because we made these big mistakes? Are
Mm.
we secretly punishing ourselves? How do we escape that?
Yeah, big question. I think this what applies a lot to Joe, the idea of the guilt. Norma has guilt too, which I'll get to in a bit, but his guilt is because he feels like he's let down his own family. It's a self-imposed guilt, right? It's a
Mhm.
self-imposed exile. No one's asked him to do this to himself, but he just feels it so intensely that he needs to get away. And his idea is that the best opportunity for my family to thrive is without me, right? So that's a decision he makes out of guilt, that he needs to be aware that he thinks he's the problem, right? Even though his sister does tell him that his sister May eventually does tell him that he's just way too into himself. Um, but he feels that deeply, and it's not like a surface thing. It's not like he's not doing it for attention or anything. He really feels that the only way to help his family, the only way to love his family appropriately is to remove himself from it. With Norma, her guilt is very different because it's imposed on her by someone else, right? Joe is self-imposed. Her guilt is imposed on her by her mother, by her mother's reference to how she was the baby who lived and all this stuff, and how there's just so much of it. Like she can't move in that house without feeling stifled and guilt-ridden. Her mother's headaches every time she tries to exert some independence, right? Makes her feel guilty. Like even her own decisions for her own mental health in the end, she's always feeling guilty about them because of the way her mother raised her. So they're both in a way sadness, and I agree with that. But Joe's is a self-imposed guilt, whereas Ruthie's is her guilt is imposed upon her like a ton of bricks. Poor thing.
There was an odd satisfaction for the reader that Norma's new family life was not perfect.
Hmm.
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
It
of course.
almost was a self-inflicted penalty. I don't know, but
Yes.
it felt sort of good.
Yeah. And the mother, the thing she always wanted, and it didn't turn out that way, right? Because she was so paranoid that someone would do to her what she had done to someone else. So, and she was so paranoid that she couldn't even enjoy this thing she thought she wanted. She couldn't even love her properly the way she thought she wanted to, and that she could. So it's
Mhm,
really kind of a sad situation for everybody.
mhm.
And I want to pick up on something you had just mentioned a second ago, and that is this theme about loving others in their own way. And that was
Mhm.
a quote from your story because we heard this a few times, right? Aunt June kept telling Norma this about her own parents. They love you in their own way. And Norma had a hard time accepting that statement, especially as a child. And I wanted to ask you, you know, it doesn't, do you have to love others in a way that makes sense to them? Or do you continue loving them in your own way?
Well, as you see with Lenore, her own way of loving her daughter was not exactly healthy, right? So I think you should love people the way they want to be loved. So I think that, yeah, I think we have to love people the way they need to be loved, and we have to step back sometimes and view people how they are. I know, again, families, we have complicated families, right? And there are different people in my families with different realities. So I go to them. I love them the way they want to be loved. Sometimes it's with constant communication. Sometimes it's like leave me alone, right? So I think everybody deserves that. But with children, it's so easy to love them, right? I have a brand new niece. I have five altogether.
Aw.
A brand new niece who's not even a month old yet. And I'm just absolutely in love with her. And I told her parents, my brother and my sister-in-law, you want me around? That's okay. If you're too busy, I will stay away, but I always want pictures. Like, and she's so young right now that all she needs is the love and affection. When they get older, they may need structure and stuff. And this is speaking to someone who doesn't have children. But I think you have to ask them what they want, especially if a child struggles with mental health, and see what they want. And Norma wasn't exactly struggling with mental health, but she was struggling with not understanding who she was and where she belonged in the world. Did I ramble? I tend to ramble.
No, not at all. In fact, your book is very deep, and there were, I think, sub themes, and one of them dealt with this issue of what are the basic things that children need? What is that
Hmm.
the bare minimum of love and attention and affection? And I kept thinking about that throughout actually both stories, not just
Okay.
Norma's. So
Right.
that was very well done.
Yeah, and I think Joe
Mm.
does have that love, right? His family does love him. Again, they're not perfect, but they demonstrate love and compassion more well. Oh, not good with the words today. Better than Norma's family for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are just thrilled that you came on the show to discuss this amazing book. In fact, we got to show it again because, again, it's just so beautiful, but it's
It is.
beautiful inside too. And now, Amanda, before we let you go, we'd like to know what's on your radar. We're wondering if you could share a little glimpse of what you're doing next.
Sure. So I have my short story collection actually comes out in Canada in August and in the US in February. So that's exciting. So it's called Waiting for the Long Night Moon, which is a short story that won the Indigenous Voices Award here in Canada back in 2021. So that's exciting. I am working on a new novel and I'm teaching. Right now, I'm just reading a lot. I'm recovering from knee surgery, so I'm not moving around a lot. So I get to just sit and read, which is really nice. Catching up on all my friends' new novels, and yeah, I'm just loving life right now. I get to read books and write books and talk about books all the time.
It
Sounds like
sounds
our
like
world.
I
Yeah, yeah,
know. It
it's
sounds
really great.
wonderful.
And I'm very
Um,
excited that through this novel that people are coming familiar with the Mi'kmaq people because I get a lot of notes saying we've never even heard of the Mi'kmaq people, right? So I'm really happy that people are becoming more aware. And this is the berry pickers were real people. My dad was a berry picker, right?
wow.
In the 60s in Maine. So that's where the inspiration for this book came from. And the Mi'kmaq still pick berries in Maine. So it's just kind of an interesting way to get some history out there as well through fiction. So yeah.
Absolutely. It was wonderful. I want to tell our listeners how to connect with you. You have a beautiful website, amandapetersauthor.com. They can connect with you there. They can see your short story collection and also hear about what you have coming up next. So thank you so much for coming on the show. We just loved having you, and we hope to see you again soon with that new book.
We
Okay,
loved
thank you so
it.
much for having me.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Take care.
Kristen, I mean, this book had a lot of really deep issues. And the one that we didn't touch upon because we can't have her for an hour, but when the little girl goes missing, we witness and feel a lot of pain in death. And there was a quote in the book that said, "You never know what your last words to someone are going to be. And it's hard to reconcile when the deed is done and they are dead and gone." And I thought of that for a long time. I thought, wow, so true. We are not going to go through our lives thinking, I better say something nice because this could be the last time. However, there's some wisdom in this to not leave people in a broken place.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. Boy, you brought up a big subject that probably hits home for a lot of people because who doesn't have an issue or a broken relationship that they would love to mend? But in this story, we saw where that left a gaping hole in families, two families. And again, it might be from trauma, it might be from unforgiveness, but there is always something missing. And even when they try to push it away or run away from it or self medicate or whatever it is people do to try to fill that hole, it's still there. And so those are very interesting words that you just quoted there.
Let me take it one step further because I thought this had something to do with last words that were or were not spoken, also on behalf of the dead. It says this: "I always wondered at the secrets the dead take with them. Some are intended, things they never got around to saying, like I'm sorry. But some secrets are so dark, they're best to remain buried." Whoa, this hit me hard. Like grandparents, great grandparents, aunts and uncles. Now you get the DNA testing. So your people are finding they have relatives they never knew they had. We could take this all sorts of places. But I thought how interesting that is. The responsibility, not just upon the living, but those who are gone to reconcile, make amends, and say those words.
Yeah. But sometimes those secrets can lead to something beautiful when they spill out, because 40 years ago, what should have been kept a secret or what people regarded as a secret, now we look at it as something to be celebrated or something beautiful about that person. So, I don't know. Secrets have a way of coming out. And I think sometimes that's a good thing.
Me too. I thought the same thing as you because we are a generation now. I'm so proud that we do accept differences in each other. We accept unusual pathways and life choices. We are more attempting to understand, empathize, comprehend, instead of make them just like me. And so that's true. Maybe we are a place where secrets from the past can come out safely now. I like
Yeah.
that idea.
Absolutely. The other thing we didn't talk about, and I really encourage readers, because you and I were definitely tuned into this, is the whole issue of race and culture and some of the things that we might even believe about ourselves or our people. And so there was a very interesting theme. Again, we can't discuss it and give away things in the story relating to that very issue and looking at ourselves as a culture or a group. So I this story just had so much there. There was a lot of depth, like we said, but really causes you to think no matter what your background or your ancestors, who they are.
So true. Love that.
All right. Well, I am going to tell our listeners about what we have coming up. We're so excited. We have a summer full of amazing people and books. We have Emiko Jean, The Return of Ellie Black, Jamie Brenner's story, A Novel Summer, Kate White, The Last Time She Saw Him, Lisa Barr, The Goddess of Warsaw, Lisa Wingate, Shelterwood, Jill Shalvis, The Summer Escape. We have Brian Andrews and Jeffrey Wilson writing for Tom Clancy with their book, The Act of Defiance. Awesome. We have Jeffrey Deaver and Isabella Maldonado with Fatal Invasion. We have Preston and Child, Angel of Vengeance. And I know we have a couple others that we'll be able to announce very soon. Also very exciting. And listeners, please connect with us. We want to hear from you. We want you to spread our social media if you can. We know that people are hungry for these kinds of deep down discussions because we love it and we are hearing from you that you do as well. And you can find us on our website at bookstormpodcast.com. On TikTok, we are on YouTube. You can find our beautiful beautiful videos and all of these authors that are so enjoyable to go back and look at who we've got there. And you can find us at our website where we have all of our links, and that is bookstormpodcast.com. Until next time, listeners, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.